My father's text arrived exactly as I locked in the seating chart for the biggest night of the year. He warned me to skip the family reunion, terrified I would embarrass them in front of my sister's boyfriend. The senator, I simply replied, "Understood. They have no idea that the man they are trying to impress is already assigned to seat 1 at my table. My name is Tessa Monroe, and at 33 years old, I have learned that power is rarely loud. It is usually quiet, organized, and sits behind a tablet screen controlling the flow of 7 figures in donations." The air conditioning in the Lakeshore Grand Club was fighting a losing battle against the humid Savannah afternoon. But in the grand ballroom, the temperature was set to a crisp 68 degrees. I stood in the center of the room, the click of my heels absorbed by the plush, custom-woven carpet we had rolled out just for tonight. My thumb hovered over the iPad in my hand, adjusting the final seating arrangement for Table 1. This was not a wedding. This was not a birthday party. This was the annual Harbor Bridge Relief Network Gala, the single most critical evening for the organization I had built from the ground up. My finger dragged the icon labeled Senator Halverson to the seat directly to my right. It was a strategic move, not a personal one. At least, that was what I told myself until my phone buzzed against the palm of my other hand. It was a personal notification, distinct from the Slack pings and email alerts that had been flooding my device since 5 o'clock that morning. I looked down. The name Dad flashed on the screen. The message was long. My father did not like to text, so when he did, it usually meant he wanted to avoid a voice conversation where I might have the chance to interrupt. The text read, "Tessa, please do not come to the reunion tonight. Brielle is bringing Senator Grant Halverson to introduce him to the family. It is a very delicate time for her. We think it is best if you sit this one out. Explaining your little charity work always confuses people like that, and we do not want to embarrass the family or make things awkward. We will see you at Christmas." I stared at the words. Your little charity work. For a moment, the bustling noise of the ballroom faded. I could hear the florists arranging the white hydrangeas and the tech crew testing the microphones, but it all sounded like it was coming from underwater. My father was right about one thing. We were all at the Lakeshore Grand Club. The Monroe family reunion was scheduled for 6 o'clock in the Azalea Room, a modest annex hall down the west corridor, rented for a few $100s an hour. My event, the one he called Little, had bought out the entire main wing of the club for the night. I did not type out a defense. I did not tell him that the little charity work had secured legal defense for 3,000 families facing medical bankruptcy last year. I did not mention that the senator he was so desperate to impress was attending my event, not his reunion. I simply typed 2 words. "Okay, Dad." I hit send, locked the phone, and slipped it into the pocket of my blazer. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of expensive lilies and floor wax, and flipped the switch in my brain. The daughter was gone. The executive director was back online. "Tessa?" I turned. Noah, my deputy director and the only person in this room who knew how much coffee I had consumed in the last 48 hours, was standing there with a clipboard. He looked concerned. Noah had been with me since the days we were operating out of a sublet basement with unreliable Wi-Fi. He knew the look on my face. "Everything all right?" Noah asked, his eyes darting to the phone I had just put away. "We have the donor packets for the gold tier sponsors ready, but the printer jammed on the silver tier. I need you to sign off on the digital override." "I am fine," I said, my voice steady. "Just a reminder of why we do what we do. Families are complicated." Noah raised an eyebrow. He knew the reunion was happening down the hall. He knew because he had intercepted the venue manager 2 days ago to ensure the signage for the Monroe reunion did not clash with our gala branding. "Do you want me to have security redirect them?" Noah asked, half joking but fully willing to do it. "I can have the Azalea Room cordoned off." "No," I said. I looked up at the massive crystal chandelier above us, catching the light in 1,000 fractured rainbows. "Let them have their reunion. They think I'm not coming." "Are you?" "I am already here." "Noah," I replied, smoothing the lapel of my jacket. "Tonight, let the truth speak. If they want to ignore what is right in front of them, that is their choice. But I am done making myself smaller so they can feel big. Noah nodded slowly. Got it. Senator Halverson just checked in with his security detail. He is asking for a 10-minute briefing before the doors open. He wants to go over the verbiage on the disaster relief bill one last time. Tell him I will meet him in the green room in 20 minutes, I instructed. As Noah walked away to bark orders at the catering staff, I allowed myself 1 second of weakness. I thought about Brielle. Growing up, Brielle was the sun our family orbited around. She was beautiful, charismatic, and had a talent for attracting attention. My parents treated her achievements like national holidays. If Brielle won a local pageant, we went out for a steak dinner. If Brielle dated a quarterback, we had a barbecue to celebrate. My brother, the youngest, was the golden boy, the athlete, the one who could do no wrong. And then there was Tessa. Reliable Tessa, boring Tessa, the one who got straight A's but refused to be a cheerleader, the one who went to a state university to study public policy while Brielle went to a private arts college to study drama. My parents loved me, I suppose, in the way one loves a dependable appliance. They expected me to work hard, stay quiet, and never outshine the stars of the show. When I started Harbor Bridge, my father asked when I was going to get a real job. When we landed our first $1 million federal grant, my mother asked if that meant I could finally afford to buy a car that wasn't 10 years old. They never asked what the money was for. They never asked about the lives we saved. To them, I was just Tessa, the one who worked at a nonprofit and probably needed a loan. I walked toward the dressing suites, the sound of my footsteps echoing the rhythm of a countdown. Inside the private suite reserved for the event director, I stripped off my work blazer and slacks. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I looked tired, but under the fatigue, there was iron. Hanging on the rack was a dress I had bought 3 months ago. It was not something the old Tessa would have worn. It was a midnight blue floor-length gown, structured and architectural, with a neckline that demanded posture and presence. It was the kind of dress a woman wears when she is not asking for permission. I stepped into it. The silk lining felt cool against my skin. I zipped it up, the fabric hugging my frame perfectly. I pulled my hair back into a severe, elegant chignon and applied a coat of dark red lipstick. I was no longer the little sister. I was the woman responsible for a $20 million operating budget. I was the woman who could pick up the phone and call the governor's office and get a call back within 15 minutes. My father's text message burned in my mind. Do not embarrass us. They were currently gathering in the side hall, probably setting out potato salad and adjusting Brielle's hair, rehearsing their lines for when the senator arrived. They were preparing a narrative where I was the invisible, slightly disappointing sibling who could not make it because she was busy with her little projects. I put on my diamond earrings, real ones, bought with my own salary, and checked the time. It was 6:45. The doors to the grand ballroom would open in 15 minutes. I walked out of the dressing suite and headed toward the main entrance of the ballroom. The transformation of the space was complete. The lights were dimmed to a warm, amber glow. The centerpieces, towering arrangements of white orchids and driftwood, cast dramatic shadows on the tables. The screens on the stage were live, displaying the Harbor Bridge logo and the running total of our pre-event pledges, $2,400,000. I stood at the top of the short staircase leading down to the ballroom floor. From here, I could see everything. I could see the waiters standing at attention with trays of champagne. I could see the press pit setting up their cameras. And through the open double doors at the far end of the corridor, I could see the sign for the Azalea Room. I saw my mother peer out, looking anxious, scanning the hallway, likely checking to make sure I had obeyed orders and stayed away. She looked right past the entrance to the ballroom, unable to comprehend that the spectacle inside had anything to do with her daughter. I turned my back on her and faced the room I controlled. My father wanted me to be invisible. He wanted me to fade into the background so Brielle could shine. He wanted a ghost. I adjusted the heavy seating chart binder in my hand, feeling the weight of the evening settle on my shoulders. If they want me to disappear, tonight, I will disappear in a way they will never forget. The memory that always surfaces when I smell pot roast is from a Tuesday night in November, 17 years ago. We were sitting around the mahogany dining table my mother loved more than any of us. I was a senior in high school, clutching a thick envelope from a university that offered a specialized program in public health and policy advocacy. I had waited until dessert to bring it up. I thought the sugar might make them sweeter. I want to go into medical advocacy, I said, placing the brochure on the table. I want to help write policies that stop families from going bankrupt just because they get sick. My father did not even look up from his slice of pie. He just let out a short, dry chuckle, the kind that sounds like a cough. Advocacy, he repeated, testing the word like it was spoiled milk. And who exactly pays for that? Tessa? Do you think the poor people you want to save are going to cut you a paycheck? It is nonprofit work, Dad, I explained, my voice shrinking. There are grants, government funding. Grants, he scoffed. Begging, that is what that is. Professional begging. Brielle, who was home from her first semester at a liberal arts college where she was majoring in theater, reached over and patted my hand. Her touch was patronizing, light and dismissive. Oh, Tessie, she sighed. Just marry someone rich. It is so much easier than trying to save the world. You do not have the skin for the drama anyway. You are too beige. That word stuck to me like tar. Beige, safe, boring, unremarkable. I went to that university anyway. I did not marry rich. Instead, I worked double shifts at a diner to pay for my textbooks, because my father decided that if I wanted to pursue a hobby degree, I could fund it myself. By the time I was 22, I was working the night shift at a crisis hotline for medical billing disputes. It was not glamorous policy work yet. It was the trenches. I sat in a cubicle with gray fabric walls, wearing a headset that dug into my temples, listening to the sound of the American dream breaking apart one diagnosis at a time. I remember a call from a man in Ohio. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. He was whispering because he did not want to wake his wife. He told me he was selling his truck the next day, his work truck, the only way he made a living, because the hospital was threatening to send his wife's chemotherapy bills to collections. He was choosing between his livelihood and her life. I do not know what else to do, he had sobbed, a grown man, breaking down in the dark. I stayed on the line with him for 2 hours. I pulled up every obscure state statute I had memorized. I walked him through the application for an emergency indigent care fund he did not know existed. I helped him draft the letter to the hospital billing department, citing the exact codes that would force them to pause the collections process. 2 weeks later, I received a card at the call center. It had no return address, just a picture of a sunrise on the front. Inside, in shaky handwriting, it said, "You saved my house. You saved my truck. You saved us from losing everything. Thank you." That was the moment the switch flipped. I realized my family was wrong. This was not begging. This was warfare, and I was good at it. I founded the Harbor Bridge Relief Network 6 months later. The headquarters was the second bedroom of my rented apartment, which also doubled as my laundry room. I started with a single grant of $5,000 from a local community chest. I used an ironing board as a standing desk. For the first 3 years, I existed on instant ramen and adrenaline. I drove a 10-year-old sedan with a passenger door that only opened if you kicked it from the inside. My family saw the car. They saw the dark circles under my eyes. They saw me wearing the same 3 suits to every family function. "Still doing the charity thing?" my uncle would ask at Thanksgiving, swirling his wine. "Yes," I would say. "That is nice," my mother would add, her voice dripping with that specific Southern blend of pity and disappointment. "It is good to have a hobby that keeps you busy until you settle down." They never asked about the specifics. They never asked how I had managed to negotiate a partnership with 3 major hospital systems in the tri-state area. They never asked how I had built a network of pro bono lawyers who donated 500 billable hours a month to our cases. They never asked about the legislation we helped push through the state house that capped interest rates on medical debt. To them, Harbor Bridge was a soup kitchen. To them, I was handing out blankets. They did not know I was building an empire. I learned very quickly that in my world, perception was currency. To get the six-figure checks from the heavy hitters, the tech CEOs, the old money philanthropists, the corporate foundations, I had to look like I belonged in their boardrooms. I taught myself how to dress with lethal precision. I scoured consignment shops for secondhand designer blazers and had them tailored to fit like armor. I learned which wine to order. I learned how to shake hands with a firm, dry grip that said, "I am your equal." But the moment I left those galas and board meetings, I went back to my small apartment. I did not upgrade my car. I did not buy a condo on the river. Every spare dollar went back into the operational fund. I hired Noah. I hired a paralegal. I hired a case manager. I remember one Christmas, 3 years ago, I had just closed a deal that secured $2 million in annual funding for our pediatric cancer support wing. I was exhausted but buzzing with the victory of it. I walked into my parents' house, and Brielle was there, showing off a new diamond bracelet her then-fiancé had given her. Everyone was oohing and aahing over the sparkle. "Tessa, did you drive that clunker here?" my dad asked, looking out the window at my car parked in the driveway. "It is an eyesore, honey. Maybe I can loan you a few thousand to get something decent." You do not want people thinking the Monroes are struggling. "The car runs fine, Dad," I said, taking off my coat. "It is just embarrassing," Brielle chimed in, holding her wrist up to catch the light. "I mean, if your little organization is actually doing anything, surely they can pay you enough to drive a car made in this decade?" I looked at her. I looked at the bracelet. I knew for a fact that the man who gave it to her was leveraging his assets to cover bad real estate bets. I knew because his name had crossed my desk in a donor vetting process, and we had rejected his money. "We prioritize program costs over executive perks," I said simply. "So noble." Brielle rolled her eyes. "So boring." I swallowed the rage. I swallowed the urge to pull up my bank app and show them that I could buy her bracelet 10 times over if I wanted to, but I did not, because the money in my accounts was not for jewelry, it was for war. I kept my mouth shut. I ate the dry turkey. I let them talk about Brielle's upcoming vacation to the Maldives and my brother's promotion at the bank. I let them treat me like the poor relation, the one who needed help, the one who had failed to launch. It became a pattern. The more successful I became, the deeper their delusion grew. When Harbor Bridge made the front page of the Metro section for saving an entire neighborhood from eviction after a chemical spill, my mother called me to say, "I saw your name in the paper. I hope you are not getting involved in anything controversial. We do not want trouble." They saw the headline, but they did not read the article. They never read the article. They were comfortable with their version of me. Tessa the struggler. Tessa the saint of lost causes. Tessa the background character. It made them feel secure. If I was the failure, then their successes shone brighter. If I was the one scraping by, then their leased luxury cars and credit card-funded vacations felt more earned. I played the part. I let them have their narrative. I perfected the art of the vague answer. "Work is fine," I would say. "Just busy." I became a ghost in my own life whenever I was around them. But outside their walls, I was a titan. By the time I was 30, I had the personal cell phone numbers of 4 congressmen. I had a standing lunch date with the editor of the city's largest newspaper. I had built a safety net that caught thousands of families before they hit the concrete, all while my own family thought I was knitting scarves for the homeless. It was almost funny, in a dark, twisted way. They looked at me and saw a woman who had settled for less. They saw a woman who had no ambition. They had no idea that while they were busy polishing their image, I was busy changing the reality of the world around them. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. The bigger I got, the more influence I wielded, the more capital I controlled, the more certain they were that I was going absolutely nowhere. To understand why tonight matters so much, you have to understand the specific brand of desperation my sister Brielle was operating under. For the last 6 months, she had been spiraling. Her divorce from a semi-professional golfer had been loud, public, and expensive. Her social standing, which she valued more than her oxygen intake, had taken a severe hit. She needed a win. She needed a headline that would make her friends jealous and her enemies silent. Enter Senator Grant Halverson. He was the golden ticket, young for a senator, charismatic, and genuinely respected on both sides of the aisle. Catching him was, in Brielle's mind, the equivalent of winning the Super Bowl. Bringing him to the annual Monroe family reunion was her victory lap. I knew exactly how the preparations had gone down, because my mother is incapable of keeping a secret, even when she is trying to conspire against me. I had heard the voicemails she left for my aunts. I knew the strategy. They were treating this reunion not as a family gathering, but as a theatrical production. The script had been written days ago. My father was to wear his navy blazer and tell anecdotes about his investments, glossing over the fact that most of them were mediocre at best. My brother was to talk about his golf handicap and his promotion, ensuring the senator knew we were good stock. And then there was the problem of Tessa. The consensus, reached over a conference call I was obviously not invited to, was that I was a liability. It was not that I was embarrassing in a loud, drunken way. It was worse. I was embarrassing in a boring, depressing way. She always talks about policy. My mother had reportedly said to my aunt, "She gets so intense about healthcare codes and poverty lines, it makes people uncomfortable. Grant deals with that all day at work. The last thing he wants is to hear Tessa drone on about filing deadlines and grant applications while he is trying to eat his potato salad." They were terrified I would corner the senator and bore him to death with complaints about bureaucratic red tape. They wanted the evening to be light, breezy, and affluent. I was the dark cloud of reality they could not afford. So, the narrative was set. Brielle had taken care of the backstory. She had explained me away to Grant so he would not ask questions. "My sister is sweet," she had likely told him, batting her eyelashes in that practiced way of hers. "She works for a tiny little local charity, answering phones, stuffing envelopes, organizing bake sales. It keeps her busy. She's very passionate about her little projects, even if they do not really go anywhere." Grant, being the man he is, would have nodded and smiled. He is a policy nerd at heart. I know this because I have read every white paper he has written in the last 5 years, but he trusts Brielle. Why would he suspect that the woman he is dating would lie about her own sister's career? To him, I was just Tessa, the admin assistant, the well-meaning spinster sister who probably owned too many cats and not enough ambition. While they were putting the finishing touches on their lies in the azalea room, polishing their smiles and checking their reflections in the silverware, I was standing in the center of the grand ballroom, 50 feet away. My iPad pinged with a priority notification. It was from the venue's VIP liaison. "Senator Halverson has arrived on the premises. He is requesting to see the event director immediately regarding the keynote speech timing." I looked at the message. A small, cold smile touched my lips. Grant was here. He was early, and he was not looking for Brielle. He was not looking for the Monroe family reunion. He was looking for the person in charge. I tapped the screen to acknowledge the request. Noah appeared at my elbow, looking flustered. He had a headset on one ear and a walkie-talkie in his hand. "Tessa, we have a situation with the senator. His team is asking to bypass the green room and come straight to the technical booth. He wants to go over the teleprompter script with you personally. He says there is a specific amendment he wants to mention, but he wants your clearance first." Noah paused, looking at me with a furrowed brow. He knew my family was next door. He knew the senator was technically here as Brielle's date for the reunion, even though he was the keynote speaker for my gala. The overlap was a logistical nightmare that Noah had been trying to navigate all week. "Do you want me to warn them?" Noah asked, his voice low. "I can send a runner to the azalea room. Tell your sister that the senator is stopping by your event first. It might soften the blow when they realize where he is." I looked at Noah. I looked at the massive screen behind the stage, which was currently displaying a loop of the families we had helped this year. I thought about my father's text message telling me to stay away. I thought about Brielle's little charity comment. "No," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of any anger. It was just business. Do not say a word to anyone in the azalea room. Let them wait. But Tessa. Noah hesitated. If he walks in here and sees you, and then realizes your family is next door, it is going to be a bloodbath. It is not revenge, Noah, I said, turning to face him fully. It is education. They have spent 30 years refusing to see me. I am just removing the blinders. If the light hurts their eyes, that is not my fault. Noah nodded slowly, a look of terrified respect on his face. Okay, I will bring him to table 1. I checked the time. It was 6:52. The irony of the venue arrangement was not lost on me. I had discovered earlier that afternoon why the Monroe family reunion was happening at the Lakeshore Grand Club in the first place. Usually, my father complained that this venue was too expensive, but apparently, a friend of a friend had tipped him off about a last-minute opening in the Azalea Room. The Azalea Room was a side parlor, separated from the grand ballroom by a single soundproofed partition wall. The only reason it was available, and the only reason it was cheap, was because the primary client, Harbor Bridge Relief Network, had rented the entire main wing. The club had offered the side room at a discount just to fill the space, knowing the noise from our gala might bleed through the walls later in the night. My father had booked the room because he thought he was getting a steal. He had no idea that his discount was subsidized by my deposit. He was literally sitting in my shadow, thinking he was the king of the castle. I walked toward table 1, the centerpiece of the room. It was draped in platinum linens and set with fine china. The place cards were hand calligraphed. Seat 1, Senator Grant Halverson. Seat 2, Tessa Monroe, Executive Director. I stood behind my chair, my hand resting on the cool wood. I could imagine the scene in the room next door. Brielle would be checking her makeup for the 10th time. My father would be pacing, checking his watch, wondering why the senator was late. They would be rehearsing their lines. Don't mention Tessa. Keep it light. Impress him. They thought I was the uninvited guest. They thought I was the one who had been banished. But as I watched the security team open the main doors to admit the senator, I knew the truth. They were not banning me from their world. They were unknowingly camping out on the edge of mine. Tonight, they were going to learn that you cannot banish the person who owns the building. The doors swung open. Grant Halverson stepped into the ballroom. He looked every bit the statesman. Tall, sharp suit, an air of easy confidence. He scanned the room, ignoring the waiters and the technicians. His eyes were looking for the person in charge. He was looking for the executive director. And as he began to walk toward me, oblivious to the fact that his girlfriend was waiting for him on the other side of the wall, I took a breath. They wanted me to be invisible, but tonight, I am the one signing the checks. Tonight, I am the only thing they will be able to see. The doors to the grand ballroom opened exactly at 6:30, and the atmosphere inside shifted instantly from a state of preparation to a state of performance. The air, previously filled with the quiet hum of technicians and catering staff, was now charged with the murmur of 300 of the most influential people in the state. This was the part of the night I usually dreaded, the initial mingle where small talk was the currency of the realm, but tonight I felt a strange, cold calm. I was not just a host. I was a director watching the actors take their places on a stage I had built. I moved through the crowd with a practiced fluidity. My mind was a steel trap, snapping shut on names, faces, and donation histories. Marcus, I said, extending my hand to the CEO of the largest regional bank in the Southeast. He was wearing a tuxedo that likely cost more than my father's car. It is good to see you. I saw the quarterly report on the Community Lending Initiative. The numbers looked strong. Marcus smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. Tessa, always on the ball. Yes, we are pleased, but I am more interested to see if you can top last year's gala. My board is still talking about the impact metrics you sent over. Wait until the second act, I promised, gesturing toward the stage. We have a new partnership with the Legal Aid Society that is going to change the landscape for medical bankruptcy defense. I moved on before the conversation could stall. I greeted the chief of surgery from St. Joseph's Hospital, asking him specifically about the new pediatric wing expansion. I nodded to the editor of the Savannah Morning News, dropping a subtle hint about an exclusive on our upcoming disaster relief fund. Every interaction was calculated. Every smile was a strategic asset. I was demonstrating competence in a language these people understood, the language of results. Above us, the massive LED screen behind the stage began its loop. I had fought with the marketing team about this video. They wanted sad music. They wanted black and white photos of children looking destitute. They wanted pity. I had refused. We do not sell pity, I had told them. We sell solutions. The screen now displayed high-definition images of families standing in front of their homes, holding keys, smiling. It showed business owners reopening their shops after floods. It showed fathers hugging their children, not in hospital beds, but on baseball fields. The text overlay was stark and bold. Crisis averted, dignity restored. The ticker at the bottom of the screen showed the evening's goal, $3 million. We were already at $2.4 million before the first salad had been served. I made my way toward the entrance, checking the flow of the arrival line. The check-in desk was a well-oiled machine, with 3 staff members handing out badges and table assignments. I stood near a pillar, partially obscured by a towering floral arrangement of white hydrangeas, observing the transition point between the lobby and my event. That was when I heard them. The voice was unmistakable. It was high-pitched, anxious, and laced with the specific frantic energy my mother adopted whenever she felt out of her depth. "Oh my God! Look at the chandeliers!" she hissed. I could not see her, but I knew she was standing just on the other side of the velvet rope that separated the main gala entrance from the corridor leading to the azalea room. "This place is too much. Are we underdressed? Robert, look at that woman's dress. That is real silk." "Calm down, Linda," my father's voice rumbled, tight with stress. "We look fine. Just keep your head up. Act like we belong here." "I just do not want anything to go wrong," my mother whispered, her voice carrying through the thin gap in the crowd. "With the senator coming, it has to be perfect for Brielle." "It will be," my father snapped, "as long as we stick to the plan. Is Tessa definitely not coming?" My breath hitched in my throat. I stood perfectly still behind the flowers. "She texted me back," my father continued. "She said okay. Thank God. The last thing we need is her showing up and cornering Grant with her boring statistics. You know how she gets. She would start talking about deductibles and depress everyone. We cannot have anyone saying the wrong thing tonight, especially Tessa." "Especially Tessa," my mother echoed, sounding relieved. "You are right. She does not fit in with people like Grant." I watched a waiter walk past me with a tray of smoked salmon appetizers. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life. They were standing 10 feet away from me, terrified that I would ruin their night with my presence, completely unaware that the chandelier they were admiring was paid for by my budget. They were worried I would not fit in with people like Grant, while I was the one who had personally approved Grant's seating arrangement. I did not step out. I did not confront them. I let the poison of their words settle into my stomach, hardening into something cold and heavy. I turned on my heel and walked back into the ballroom. It was 6:50. I saw him immediately. Senator Grant Halverson was standing near the stage, talking to one of the sound technicians. He looked impatient, checking his watch, his eyes scanning the room. When he saw me approaching, his face relaxed into a smile of genuine recognition. "Tessa," he said, stepping forward to shake my hand. His grip was firm, professional. "Thank you for accommodating the early arrival. My schedule has been a nightmare today." "It is never a problem, Senator," I replied, my voice smooth. "We appreciate you making the time. The keynote is the anchor of the evening." "I wanted to run something by you," Grant said, lowering his voice slightly. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I made a few tweaks to the closing remarks regarding the new healthcare bill. I know your organization is sensitive about the bipartisan language, so I wanted to make sure I did not cross a line." "Let me see," I said. We stood there for a moment, heads bent together over the speech. It was a conversation between equals. He was asking for my approval. He respected my political acumen. To him, I was not the boring sister. I was a power player. "This looks fine," I said, handing the paper back. "Just emphasize the community impact rather than the federal mandate. That plays better in this room." "Understood." Grant nodded. He looked around the room, taking in the scale of the event. "You have done an incredible job here. Tessa, Brielle told me you worked in nonprofit, but she made it sound, well, smaller." I smiled. It was a razor-sharp expression. Families can be protective of the details. "Speaking of which," Grant checked his watch again, "Brielle and her parents are in the side hall, the Azalea room. I am supposed to meet them there for a quick drink before I come back here for the speech. I told her I had to do a tech check first." He gestured vaguely toward the wall that separated us from the reunion. "Actually, Senator," I said, making a split-second decision. I placed a hand on the back of the chair at table 1, the center seat, the seat of honor. "Why don't you just take your seat? The program is about to start, and the doors for the general reception open in 10 minutes. If you leave now, you will get caught in the crush." Grant looked torn. "But Brielle—" "I have a better idea," I said. "Why don't you text her? Tell her to come here. Tell her the technical check is running long and you have a seat waiting for her at the main table." Grant looked at the table. He looked at the impressive spread, the VIP name cards, the sheer gravity of the event. Then he looked at me. He trusted me. "That makes sense," he said. "I will tell her to bring the parents too? There are empty seats?" I looked at the empty chairs next to him. Seats I had left open for major donors who had canceled last minute, or perhaps seats I had subconsciously left open for this exact moment. "Yes," I said. "There is room. Tell them to come to the grand ballroom. Tell them you are at table 1. Grant pulled out his phone. "Done. Thanks, Tessa. You are a lifesaver." He sat down. He took a sip of water. He looked comfortable, authoritative, exactly where he belonged. I stepped back, moving into the shadows near the stage wings. It was 6:59. I watched Grant typing the message. I imagined the phone buzzing in Brielle's clutch in the room next door. I imagined her reading the text. "Come to the grand ballroom, table 1. She would think it was a mistake. She would think he meant the Azalea room. But he would insist, and they would come. They would walk out of their small, rented side room, down the corridor, and through the double doors of my world. The digital clock on the wall flicked to 7 o'clock. The house lights dimmed. The spotlight hit the center of the stage. The music swelled, a dramatic, orchestral piece that commanded silence. I stood in the dark, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The countdown was over. The collision was imminent. They were about to walk in, and everything they thought they knew about their lives was about to shatter against the reality of mine. The double doors to the grand ballroom swung open with a hydraulic hiss that cut through the low murmur of the crowd. I was seated at table 1, my back straight against the velvet upholstery, a crystal glass of sparkling water untouched near my right hand. I did not turn around immediately. I watched the reaction of the room first. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Grant Halverson walked in first, looking every inch the distinguished statesman in his charcoal suit, but hanging onto his arm, practically glowing with a radioactive level of self-satisfaction, was Brielle. My sister had dressed for a coronation. She wore a floor-length gown of shimmering gold sequins that caught the light of the chandeliers and threw it back with aggressive intensity. It was a beautiful dress, undeniably, but it was a dress that screamed, "Look at me." Her hair was swept up in an elaborate twist, and she was smiling, a wide, camera-ready smile that she was bestowing upon the room as if she were the guest of honor, rather than a +1 who had been summoned by text message. Behind them, my parents followed, looking slightly shell-shocked. My mother was clutching her purse with both hands, her eyes darting around the cavernous room, taking in the 3-story high floral arrangements and the live string quartet playing softly in the corner. My father was trying to adjust his tie, looking terrified that someone might ask him for a donation. They looked like tourists who had accidentally wandered onto a movie set. I watched as a senior usher, a young woman named Sarah, who I had personally trained to handle VIPs, intercepted them with a polite bow. "Good evening, Senator," Sarah said, her voice carrying just enough for me to hear. "If you would please follow me, we have your party seated at the center table." "Thank you," Grant said, patting Brielle's hand. Brielle leaned in toward him, her voice a stage whisper that she clearly intended for the nearby tables to hear. "Oh, Grant, this is stunning. I had no idea the reunion venue had a ballroom like this. Did you upgrade us? You are too sweet." Grant looked confused for a split second, his brow furrowing as he walked. I thought, well, never mind. Let us just get seated. They began the long walk across the plush carpet toward table 1. It was a slow procession. Brielle was walking with a practiced sway, nodding to people she did not know. Assuming their stares were born of admiration rather than curiosity, she did not recognize the faces of the hospital CEOs or the philanthropic directors. She just saw an audience. I remained perfectly still. I felt like a statue carved from ice. As they approached the table, the reality of the seating arrangement began to dawn on them. Table 1 was elevated slightly on a low riser, giving it a commanding view of the entire hall. It was set for 10 people, but currently, only one seat was occupied. Mine. Brielle saw me first. Her step faltered. The smile froze on her face, twitching slightly at the corners. She blinked, as if trying to clear a smudge from her contact lenses. She looked at me, then looked around the room, then looked back at me. Her brain was trying to process an image that did not fit into her file system. Tessa was supposed to be in a cardigan, somewhere unimportant. Tessa was not supposed to be sitting at the head of the high table, wearing a midnight blue gown that cost more than Brielle's car, looking like she owned the oxygen in the room. "Tessa?" she mouthed, the sound lost in the ambient noise. Sarah, the usher, pulled out the chair to my right for the senator. Then she moved to the chair next to him for Brielle. "Senator Halverson," Sarah said, gesturing to the seat. "Ms. Monroe Hawkins." Grant released Brielle's arm and stepped toward his chair. He was smiling at me, a professional, warm greeting ready on his lips. He placed his hand on the back of the chair, and his eyes drifted down to the place card set on the linen directly in front of him. Senator Grant Halverson. Then, his gaze slid to the right, to the place card sitting in front of me. The calligraphy was large, elegant, and impossible to misread. Tessa Monroe, Executive Director, Harbor Bridge Relief Network. Grant stopped. The movement was abrupt, like a film reel jamming in a projector. He stared at the card. He read it once. He read it twice. His hand tightened on the back of the chair, his knuckles turning white. Slowly, very slowly, he lifted his head and looked at me. The warmth was gone from his eyes, replaced by a dawn of profound realization. He looked at my face, really looked at me, stripping away the layers of Brielle's sister and seeing the woman sitting there. He saw the way the staff watched me. He saw the binder of event cues next to my elbow. He saw the authority that rolled off me in waves. "Tessa," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the air between us like a knife. "It is you?" It was not a question of identity. It was a question of existence. "Hello, Grant," I said. My voice was calm, steady, pitched perfectly to be heard by everyone at the table and no one else. "Please, sit down. We are about to begin." Brielle let out a sound that was half gasp, half squeak. I do not understand. What are you doing here? This is the senator's table." "Actually," I said, picking up my glass of water and taking a slow sip, "it is my table. The senator is my guest." My parents had finally caught up, standing behind Brielle like confused ducklings. My father's face was a mask of horror. He looked at me, then at the senator, then at the hundreds of people in the room. He realized, with a sinking dread, that he was not the patriarch here. He was a spectator. Tessa, my mother hissed, leaning over the rail of the riser. What have you done? You are embarrassing us. Get up. Before I could answer, a shadow fell over the table. It was Jonathan Sterling, the chairman of the board for St. Jude's and one of the most powerful men in Georgia. He had walked over to greet me, holding a glass of champagne. Tessa, Jonathan boomed, his voice jovial. Incredible turnout. I just saw the preliminary numbers on the silent auction. You have outdone yourself, my dear. He glanced at the frozen tableau of my family standing awkwardly around the table. Are these your guests? Jonathan asked, smiling politely at Grant and Brielle. I do not believe we have been introduced. I set my glass down. Jonathan, this is Senator Halverson, our keynote speaker, and these, I gestured vaguely with one hand, are my family. They are visiting. Jonathan's eyebrows shot up. Ah, the family. Well, you must be incredibly proud. Your daughter runs the tightest ship in the Southeast. If she ever decides to leave the nonprofit sector, I have a standing offer for her to run my conglomerate. She is a shark. He laughed, clapped Grant on the shoulder, and walked away. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Grant slowly pulled out his chair and sat down. He did not look at Brielle. He was staring at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. His mind was racing, replaying every conversation he had ever had with my sister, every dismissive comment, every lie. Harbor Bridge, Grant said softly. You are the executive director of Harbor Bridge. Yes, I said. I have been emailing with your office for 6 months, he said, the pieces clicking into place. I have been quoting your white papers on the Senate floor, the Monroe proposal regarding emergency medical debt relief. That is you? That is me, I confirmed. Grant turned his head slowly to look at Brielle. She was still standing, her hand gripping her clutch so hard I thought the leather might snap. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her makeup standing out in stark, artificial relief. You told me, Grant said, his voice dangerously low, that she answered phones. You told me she worked at a soup kitchen. Brielle stammered. Her confidence had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified child caught in a lie. I thought it was, she never said. It is just a charity. Grant, it is small. I didn't know. You did not know? Grant repeated. He gestured to the room, to the 300 guests, to the massive screens, to the empire surrounding us. You did not know your sister ran the largest relief network in the state? The one I am here to support? She never talks about it, Brielle cried out, her voice rising in panic. She is always so secretive. How was I supposed to know? I looked at her. I looked at my parents, who were staring at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I was not secretive, Brielle, I said. My voice was soft, but it carried the weight of 30 years of neglect. You just never asked, not once, in 10 years. Brielle opened her mouth to argue, to spin it, to find some way to make this my fault, but nothing came out. The evidence was overwhelming. The lie she had fed the senator and herself was dead. Grant looked at Brielle for a long moment. It was a look of clinical assessment, as if he were seeing a stranger. He saw the vanity, the cruelty, and the profound lack of substance. He turned back to me. He picked up his napkin and placed it on his lap, signaling that the conversation with Brielle was effectively over. Tessa, Grant said, his tone shifting back to professional respect, though his eyes were still burning with the shock of the betrayal. We need to discuss the implementation strategy for that grant before I go up there. If you wrote the policy, you are the only one who knows where the loopholes are. I do, I said, opening my binder. I have the data highlighted on page 4. Grant nodded, leaning in to look at the document. He acted as if Brielle and my parents were not there. But before he focused entirely on the paper, he paused. He turned his head slightly, casting one final, withering glance at my sister, who was now sinking into her chair like a deflating balloon. Brielle, he said, we are going to have a very long conversation later. I am trying to understand something. Brielle looked up, tears welling in her eyes, hopeful that he was going to forgive her. Tell me, Grant said, his voice slicing through the noise of the gala. How exactly did you describe your sister to me? Because the woman sitting here is not the person you laughed about over dinner last week. Brielle flinched as if he had slapped her. I did not look at her. I looked at the stage. The lights were dimming further. The show was about to start. Page 4. Senator, I said. And for the first time in my life, the silence at the table was not because I was being ignored, it was because they were terrified to speak. The ballroom settled into a hush that felt heavier than the crystal chandeliers hanging overhead. When Tessa approached the podium, she did not look like the invisible sister who had spent a lifetime folding herself into the corners of rooms to avoid taking up space. She adjusted the microphone with a steady hand, the light catching the sharp, deliberate line of her jaw. There were no trembling notes in her voice, only the clear, resonant timbre of someone who had done the work and knew exactly what it was worth. She began not with a joke or a pleasantry, but with the hard reality of the numbers. She spoke of the 365 days that the foundation had operated in the red before turning a profit. She detailed the 52 families who had been pulled from the brink of homelessness in the last 6 months alone. She described the 98% success rate of their job placement program. I watched the room shift. At first, the donors and local celebrities had been politely attentive, swirling their wine, checking their watches. But as Tessa spoke, the ambient noise of silverware scraping against china ceased. She was painting a picture of a community that was broken but mending, and she was doing it with the kind of granular detail that proved she had been on the ground, holding the hammer, signing the checks, and drying the tears. She did not use a single note card. The data was not memorized. It was lived. At the center table, Brielle sat as if she had been encased in glass. The smile she had plastered on her face for the photographers at the entrance was beginning to fracture at the edges. She reached for her water glass, her fingers trembling just enough to make the ice cubes chime against the crystal. Her phone, hidden beneath the tablecloth in her lap, lit up incessantly. It was a barrage of messages from our parents, who were seated in the VIP overflow room adjacent to the main hall. Is that Tessa? Why is she speaking? You said you were accepting the award. Answer me. Brielle swiped the notifications away, but they kept returning, each vibration against her thigh feeling like a small electric shock. She looked up at the stage, desperate to catch Tessa's eye, desperate for her sister to stumble, to stutter, to revert to the shy girl who could be bullied into silence. But Tessa did not look at her. Tessa looked over her, through her, addressing the room as if Brielle were merely a ghost in the crowd. When Tessa finished, she did not wait for the applause. She simply nodded, stepped back, and introduced Grant. The applause was polite but confused. The program listed Brielle as the keynote speaker for the acceptance. As Grant took the stage, the murmur of speculation rippled through the crowd. Grant adjusted his suit jacket, his expression unreadable. He waited for the silence to return, letting the tension stretch until it was nearly uncomfortable. He gripped the sides of the podium and leaned in. He started by thanking the board and the donors, the standard preamble that allowed the audience to relax. But then, his tone shifted. He abandoned the teleprompter. He looked down at the center table, his gaze lingering first on Tessa, who had taken her seat with the poise of a queen in exile, and then sliding to Brielle, whose mascara was beginning to smudge beneath her lower lashes. He spoke about the concept of visibility. He talked about how easy it is to wear the crown when someone else has forged the gold. He told the story of a project that had saved the community center from bankruptcy 2 years ago. He described a snowy night in December, exactly 24 months prior, when the heating system had failed. He spoke of a leader who stayed awake for 48 hours straight, coordinating contractors, moving children to temporary shelters, and personally paying for the emergency repairs when the bank transfer was delayed. He did not mention names at first. He let the audience construct the image of this hero in their minds. Then, he leaned closer to the mic, his voice dropping an octave. intimate, and dangerous. He said that we live in a world obsessed with faces, but the world is built by hands. He said that there are people who stand in the light, and there are people who keep the generator running so the light stays on. He said he was tired of pretending that the face on the poster was the heart of the operation. The room was deadly silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Grant turned his body slightly, angling himself toward where Tessa sat. He raised a hand, not in a grand gesture, but in a simple, respectful salute. He said that tonight. He wanted to break protocol. He wanted to honor the person who had written the grant proposals, who had balanced the ledgers, who had memorized the names of every single child in the shelter. He named Tessa. The reaction was immediate. It started with a single clap from the back of the room, likely one of the shelter volunteers. Then it spread. It rolled forward like a wave. People stood up. These were the city's elite, people who prized decorum above all else, and they were rising to their feet for the woman who had been ignored for decades. Phones were raised in the air, a sea of glowing rectangles recording the moment. Grant waited for the ovation to settle, but he did not let it die completely. He had one more thing to say. He looked directly at Brielle. He did not scowl. He did not sneer. He looked at her with a profound, pitying disappointment that was far worse than anger. He asked the room a question. He asked them to consider the people in their own lives. He asked if they knew the difference between the person who tells the story and the person who lives it. Then came the sentence that would be clipped and shared across social media platforms before the night was over. He asked that if you have someone like that in your own home, someone who carries the weight of your world without asking for credit, and you choose to silence them rather than celebrate them, would you dare to say you love them? Would you dare to say you even know them? It was a rhetorical guillotine. Brielle let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. It was not loud enough for the room to hear over the lingering energy of the speech, but at the table, it was deafening. The shame was a physical heat radiating off her. She could feel the eyes of the people at the neighboring tables. The mayor's wife, the bank CEO, drilling into her. They knew, without Grant saying the explicit details of the theft or the manipulation. They understood the dynamic. The narrative of the golden child and the scapegoat had been exposed under the harsh lights of the gala. She could not breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. The phone in her lap was now buzzing continuously, a long, angry vibration that signaled a call from our mother. Brielle stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor, a jagged sound that drew eyes back to her. She did not look at Grant. She did not look at Tessa. She pressed her purse to her chest as if it were a shield and turned toward the exit. She walked fast, her heels clicking in erratic rhythm, stumbling slightly as she pushed through the double doors, fleeing the judgment of the room. The camera flashes popped, capturing her retreat. In the center of the chaos, Tessa remained seated. She did not smile. She did not cry. She watched her sister leave with a terrifying calmness. She took a sip of her water, her hand perfectly steady. The applause was still ringing. The internet was already dissecting the moment, and the power dynamic of our family had been shattered in fewer than 10 minutes. But Tessa did not look like a woman who had won. She looked like a general who knew that the retreat was not the surrender. She knew that Brielle running away was just the panic of a cornered animal. The parents were in the next room. The confrontation was inevitable. This public victory was sweet, but it was merely the opening move of the endgame. Tessa placed her glass down on the tablecloth, aligned it perfectly with the silverware, and waited for the doors to open again. The vibration started in the pocket of my cousin Greg's cargo shorts, but within 30 seconds, it had spread like a contagion through the azalea room. It was the sound of a digital wildfire. I was standing near the dessert station, accepting congratulations from the CEO of Memorial Health, when the double doors at the far end of the ballroom burst open. It was not the discreet entrance of a late donor. It was an invasion. My father led the charge. He was flanked by my mother, whose face was a patchwork of confusion and panic, and behind them trailed a confused phalanx of aunts, uncles, and cousins. They were holding their phones up, screens glowing, playing the same video on a loop. It was the clip of Grant's speech. It was the clip where the United States Senator pointed at me and called me the architect of his policy. Greg had sent it to the Monroe Family Reunion group chat with the caption, "Tessa is on the main stage. I think she is the boss." The security team moved to intercept them, but I raised a hand, signaling Noah to let them pass. I wanted this. I wanted them to walk the full length of the carpet. I wanted them to feel the thickness of the weave under their shoes. I wanted them to see the crystal centerpieces up close. As they approached, the massive LED screen behind me updated. The donation counter ticked over, swirling with digital confetti. Current total, $4,200,000. My father stopped 10 feet away from me. He looked at the screen. He looked at the number. He looked at the room filled with the city's power players, people he had spent his entire career trying to get a meeting with. Then he looked at me. He put on a smile. It was a terrible, strained thing, a grimace stretching across a face that was rapidly losing its color. He decided, in that split second, to play the role of the proud patriarch. He decided to pretend that this was a shared victory. "Tessa!" he boomed, his voice cracking slightly. He opened his arms as if to hug me, ignoring the fact that 3 hospital directors were staring at him with raised eyebrows. "There she is, my girl. Why on earth did you not tell us?" He laughed, looking around at the VIPs, trying to enlist them in his performance. "We have been sitting in that little room next door, and you are in here running the show, you little rascal. Why keep it a secret?" The air around us grew cold. I did not step into his hug. I stood perfectly still, my hands clasped in front of my navy gown. "I did not keep it a secret, Dad," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the sudden silence of the immediate vicinity, it carried like a gunshot. "Of course you did," my mother chimed in, rushing to his side, her hand clutching his arm. She offered a nervous, fluttering laugh to the CEO standing next to me. "She is always so modest. We had no idea she was doing, well, this. We thought she was just volunteering." "You thought I was volunteering," I repeated, "because that is the story you preferred." "Now, Tessa," my father warned, his smile tightening. "Don't be dramatic. We are family. You could have just mentioned it. You could have said, 'Hey, Dad, I am running a $4 million gala tonight.'" I looked him in the eye. I felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no desire to please, just a clinical detachment. "I tried to tell you 3 years ago when I made director," I said calmly. "You interrupted me to talk about Brielle's new patio furniture. I tried to send you the link to the press release last month. You replied with a thumbs-up emoji and asked if I could pet sit your dog." "We are busy people, Tessa," my mother snapped, her defensive instincts kicking in. "We cannot keep track of every little thing." "You knew the brand of Brielle's toothpaste," I said. "You knew the name of her spin instructor. You knew the exact square footage of her new apartment." "That is different," my mother hissed. "It is," I agreed. "Because you asked her." My father's face flushed a dark, angry red. "So this is what this is? You are punishing us? You let us sit in that cheap room next door while you are in here drinking champagne with the senator, just to make a point?" "I did not put you in that room, Dad," I said. "You booked it. You chose the discount rate. You chose the side entrance." From the back of the family cluster, my Aunt Marge pushed forward. She was holding a crumpled magazine she had apparently pulled from her oversized purse. It was a copy of Southern Business, 3 months old. "I knew it!" Marge shouted, pointing a manicured finger at me. "I told you, Robert. I saw this in the dentist's office. Top 40 under 40. There was a picture of a girl who looked like Tessa, but her hair was different and she was wearing a suit. I said, 'Is that our Tessa?' And you said, 'Don't be ridiculous. Tessa works at a call center.' You said it was a misprint." My father looked at Aunt Marge as if he wanted to strangle her. "Marge, not now. It says here she manages an endowment of $15 million, Marge continued, reading the caption loudly. She looked at me with wide, hungry eyes. $15 million? Tessa, honey, is that true?" "It is $20 million now," Aunt Marge, I corrected gently. My father looked like he had been punched in the gut. The number hung in the air, stripping away his last shred of denial. He wasn't just wrong, he was mathematically irrelevant. Then, the double doors banged open again. Brielle was back. She had not left the building. She had gone to the restroom, fixed her mascara, and clearly decided that running away admitted defeat. She marched toward us, her gold dress looking even more out of place now. Her eyes were wild, frantic with the need to reclaim the narrative. She pushed past Aunt Marge. She pushed past my mother. She stopped right in front of me, her chest heaving. "You did this on purpose," Brielle screamed. The string quartet stopped playing. The entire room turned to look. This was no longer a gala. It was a spectator sport. "You set me up," Brielle accused, her voice shrill and breaking. "You knew I was bringing Grant. You knew we were booking the Azalea Room. You planned this whole thing. You rented this hall just to humiliate me. You wanted to make me look small in front of him." She swept her arm out, gesturing to the room, the decorations, the success, as if my life's work was nothing more than a prop in her drama. "You are sick, Tessa," she yelled. "Spending all this money just to stage a scene to embarrass your sister." I looked at her. I looked at the sheer, breathtaking delusion of her accusation. She genuinely believed that I had constructed a multi-million-dollar charity event solely to ruin her date. "Brielle," I said. I did not shout. I did not need to. "Look at the screen." "I don't care about your screen." "Look at the date on the banner," I commanded. She blinked, confused, but her eyes flicked to the massive banner hanging above the stage. Harbor Bridge Relief Gala, Annual Fundraiser 2025. "I signed the contract for this venue 11 months ago," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria like a scalpel. "I booked the Lakeshore Grand before you even met Grant. I secured the senator as a speaker 6 months ago, before you even knew his middle name. I have been planning this night for 330 days. I took a step closer to her. "The world does not revolve around you. Brielle," I said. "I did not plan this to hurt you. I did not plan this to humiliate you. I did not plan for you at all. You were not a factor in my equation. I simply existed, and you happened to walk into the room." Brielle's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The timeline was irrefutable. The math didn't work for her victimhood. She couldn't claim I had targeted her when I had built the target long before she arrived. "But," she stammered, her eyes darting to Grant, who was standing a few feet away, watching the scene unfold with crossed arms. "But you didn't tell me." "You never asked what I did," I replied. "You assumed, and today, the cost of your assumption is your dignity." Grant stepped forward. The movement drew everyone's attention. He walked past Brielle as if she were a piece of furniture. He walked past my mother. He stopped in front of my father. My father straightened up, seeing a chance to salvage the connection. "Senator," he began, putting on his best business voice, "I apologize for the outburst. Sisters, you know, high emotions, but I am sure we can—" "Mr. Monroe," Grant cut him off. His voice was low, devoid of any politeness. It was the voice of a man who makes laws. Grant looked at my father with a gaze so heavy it seemed to physically push the older man down. "I have spent my career dealing with opposition," Grant said. "I deal with lobbyists, corrupt officials, and people who lie for a living. I can handle enemies." He glanced at me, then back at my father. "But I have never seen a man work so hard to diminish his own blood," Grant said. "You have a daughter who is a titan. She is a force of nature, and you have spent her entire life trying to convince her she is a shadow." My father stammered. We just wanted her to be realistic." "No," Grant said. "You wanted her to be convenient." Grant stepped back, aligning himself next to me. He made his choice clear to the room, to the press, and to my family. "You should leave," Grant told my father. "Not because you are not welcome at the gala, but because you just wrote yourself out of your daughter's life story, and looking at what she has built, I think that is going to be a very expensive loss for you." My father stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He looked at the donation counter, which was now flashing 4,500,000. He looked at the way the room respected me. He looked at the senator standing by my side. And for the first time in his life, he realized that the little charity thing was the only legacy his name would ever be attached to. "Come on, Robert," my mother whispered, grabbing his arm. She was crying, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of shame. "Let's go." They turned, they gathered their stunned relatives, and they walked back toward the double doors, back toward the small, rented azalea room, leaving the light of the grand ballroom behind them. I watched them go. I did not feel triumphant. I felt light. It was the weight of 30 years of expectations finally falling off my shoulders and shattering on the floor. "Are you okay?" Grant asked, his voice soft near my ear. I turned to him. I smoothed the silk of my dress. "I am fine," I said. "Actually, I am better than fine. I have a goal to hit." I turned back to the room, back to the donors, and back to the work. The family reunion was over. My life was just beginning. The adrenaline of the confrontation was still humming in my blood, but my mind had already shifted back to logistics. The donation ticker was climbing. The waiters were clearing the main course, and the event was running 6 minutes ahead of schedule. I was about to turn toward the stage to introduce the auctioneer when Noah intercepted me. He did not look like a man celebrating a victory. He looked pale, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light of the tablet in his hands. He was tapping the screen with a frantic, rhythmic intensity that I recognized immediately. It was his crisis signal. "Tessa," he said, his voice pitched low enough to be lost under the din of the string quartet. "We have a problem, a compliance problem, and it is not small." I frowned, stepping away from Grant and moving toward a quieter alcove near the service entrance. "What is it? Did a payment processor crash?" "No," Noah said, shaking his head. "It is the blind audit. The system runs an automatic cross-check on all pending grant applications against the guest list and staff registry. It is a new protocol we installed last month to prevent nepotism." He thrust the tablet into my hands. "Look at the flag that just popped up in the queue." I looked down at the screen. The software, Sentinel, displayed a red banner across the top of a file. "Conflict of interest detected. Applicant data matches restricted personnel." I scrolled down. The application was for a Small Business Community Resilience Grant. The requested amount was $75,000. The applicant was listed as Apex Consulting Group. I did not recognize the company name. It sounded generic, the kind of shell name people use when they want to sound important without actually doing anything. "I do not know this company," I said. "Why is it flagging?" "Look at the registered address." Noah pointed a shaking finger at the line item. "And look at the IP address of the submission. It was uploaded 3 weeks ago." I read the address, 429 Oak Ridge Drive. My stomach dropped. The sensation was instant and nauseating, like missing a step on a staircase in the dark. That was my parents' house. "And look at the proprietor," Noah whispered. "Caleb Monroe. My brother, the golden boy, the one who had just been promoted, according to the family legend, the one who was supposedly too successful to bother with my little charity events. They applied for a hardship grant," I said, my voice flat, "for a business that I did not even know existed." "Read the application, Tessa," Noah urged. "It gets worse." I swiped through the digital pages. The document was a masterpiece of fiction. It claimed Apex Consulting had suffered catastrophic operational losses due to regional flooding. It claimed they employed 12 full-time staff members who were at risk of termination. It included spreadsheets of projected losses that looked professionally formatted, but were mathematically impossible if you looked at the tax ID, which had only been registered 4 months ago. They had inflated the revenue. They had falsified the employee count. And at the very bottom, under the section labeled Conflict of Interest Declaration, there was a box. "Do you have any familial or financial relationship with any board member or executive staff of Harbor Bridge Relief Network?" The box marked No was checked. The signature at the bottom was my father's, Robert Monroe, listed as senior partner. The puzzle pieces slammed together with the force of a physical blow. The sudden interest in the reunion venue, the complaints about the cost, followed by the miraculous discovery of the friend who got them the room next door. They had not chosen the Lakeshore Grand because it was nice. They had chosen it because my father thought that being in the same building as the organization, being in the physical orbit of the money, might somehow grease the wheels. Or perhaps he just wanted to be close enough to spy on the operation he was trying to milk. He had spent years mocking my work, calling it begging, all while secretly filling out the paperwork to take a piece of the pie. The system automatically rejected it because of the address match, Noah said, but because the fraud indicators are so high, the false employee count, the lying on the declaration, it is set to auto-forward to the state auditor's office in 20 minutes. That is the protocol you wrote. Tessa, zero tolerance for fraud. I looked up. My family was halfway to the double doors, making their retreat. They were walking away with their shame, but they had no idea they were walking into a felony. "Stop them," I said to Noah. "Tessa," Noah warned, "if you intervene, it looks like collusion." "I am not intervening to save them," I said, handing the tablet back to him. "I am intervening to clarify the record. Bring them back." I walked swiftly across the room, cutting through the tables. Grant saw my face and immediately set his water glass down, sensing the shift in the air. He stood up and followed me, his security detail trailing a discreet distance behind. "Dad!" I called out. My father turned near the exit. He looked tired, beaten. When he saw me approaching, a flicker of hope crossed his face. He thought I was coming to apologize. He thought I was coming to bridge the gap. "Tessa," he said, putting a hand on my mother's shoulder to stop her. "Look, we are leaving. You made your point." "This is not about the speech," I said, stopping 3 feet from him. I held out my hand to Noah, who placed the tablet in my palm. I tapped the screen and turned it around so he could see the glowing red text. "Apex Consulting," I read. "Applicant, Robert Monroe. Request, $75,000 for disaster relief." The color drained from my father's face so fast, it looked like the blood had been siphoned out of him. He froze. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I don't know what that is." My father lied. It was a reflex, a clumsy, desperate reflex. "Don't," I said. "Do not lie to me. Not here, not tonight. The IP address matches your home router. The digital signature matches your driver's license on file." Brielle stepped forward, looking between me and the screen. "What is going on? What is that?" "Dad applied for a grant," I said, looking at my sister. "He tried to claim Caleb's fake consulting business was a victim of the flood. He asked my organization, the one you all laugh at, to give him $75,000 of donor money." Brielle looked at our father. "Dad, you said the business was booming. You said Caleb needed investors for expansion, not charity." "It is a grant," my father hissed, dropping the pretense. "It is not charity. It is business capital. Everyone does it. The government hands this money out like candy. Why shouldn't we get some? Your sister sits on millions of dollars. Why should strangers get it while family struggles?" Grant stepped into the circle. His face was hard, his eyes cold. "Because it is fraud, Robert," Grant said. My father flinched at the sound of the senator's voice. "You checked the box," I said, pointing to the declaration. "You signed a legal document stating you had no relation to me. You lied on a federal application." "I did not want to make it awkward," my father argued, his voice rising in pitch. "I knew if I put your name down, you would get all high and mighty about it. I just needed the capital to get Caleb over the hump. It is a loan. Basically, we would have paid it back." "Grants are not loans," I corrected him. "And inflating employee numbers to qualify for a higher tier? That is grand larceny if the check clears." Brielle grabbed her father's arm. Her panic was shifting gears. She wasn't worried about the money. She was worried about the senator standing 2 feet away. "Dad, stop talking," Brielle whispered frantically. "Grant is right here. Do you realize what this looks like? If you get investigated for fraud, and I am dating a senator, it will be on the news." She turned to Grant, her eyes wide and pleading. "Grant, I didn't know. I swear. I thought Caleb was doing great. You have to believe me." Grant looked at her. He looked at the family that had spent the evening tearing Tessa down, only to be revealed as parasites trying to feed off her success. "You didn't know," Grant repeated. "Just like you didn't know what Tessa did for a living. You seem to not know a lot of things when it is convenient. Brielle." "Tessa, fix this," my mother pleaded. She grabbed my hand, her grip wet and desperate. "Just delete it. You are the director. You can just hit delete, right? No one has to know. We will withdraw the application. We will never ask again. Just make it go away." I looked at my mother's hand on mine. It was the same hand that had patted my head when I was 16 and told me to stop dreaming about changing the world. "It is already logged," I said, pulling my hand away. "The audit trail is immutable. That is how I built this organization. That is why people trust me with their money, because I do not have a delete button for corruption." "I am your father," he shouted. The veneer of the businessman was gone. He was just a scared, angry man. "You are going to send me to jail over paperwork? You are going to ruin Caleb's future over a technicality?" "You ruined it when you clicked submit," I said. The commotion had drawn attention. A few feet away, Jonathan Sterling, the chairman of the board, had stopped. He was a man who had made his fortune in forensic accounting before turning to philanthropy. He had ears like a bat for the word fraud. He stepped into the circle. He did not look at my family. He looked at me. "Tessa," Jonathan said. His voice was calm, but it held the weight of the entire board of directors. "Is there a problem with the vetting process?" The air in the circle vanished. This was the test. If I protected my father, if I hinted that I would handle this offline, I would lose Jonathan's trust. I would lose the board. I would lose Harbor Bridge. I would prove that I was exactly who my family thought I was, someone who could be bullied. My father looked at me. His eyes were begging now. "Save me. Be the good daughter. Be the quiet one." I looked at Jonathan. I squared my shoulders. "There is no problem with the process, Mr. Sterling," I said clearly. "The automated system identified a conflict of interest and a discrepancy in the applicant's data. The file has been flagged for rejection and forwarded to the external compliance auditor as per Article 4 of our charter." My father let out a sound like a deflating tire. Jonathan nodded. He looked at my father, understanding everything in a single glance. "Excellent. Integrity is the only currency that matters in this room. Keep up the good work, Director." He walked away. My father stared at me. You just turned me in." "I just did my job," I said. "The job you said wasn't real." "How could you?" my mother sobbed. "We are family. Family protects family." "No," I said. "Family supports family. You have never supported me. You wanted to use me. You told me to stay away tonight because you were ashamed of me, but you were perfectly happy to take my money as long as no one knew it came from me." Grant stepped forward again. He placed a hand on the small of my back, a gesture of solidarity, not ownership. "I think you should leave," Grant said to them. "Before the compliance officer comes over here to take a formal statement, if you leave now, you might just deal with a rejected application. If you stay and make a scene, you might deal with a sheriff." Brielle looked at Grant. She realized, with a terrifying clarity, that the connection was severed. She wasn't the senator's girlfriend anymore. She was the sister of the woman he admired, and the daughter of the man he despised. "Grant," she whispered. "Go," he said. My father turned. He looked old. He looked small. He walked through the doors, followed by my mother and Brielle. They did not look back. I stood there, the tablet still in my hand. The music swelled again. The party continued. A donor from the table behind us, a woman who owned a chain of pharmacies, leaned over. She had clearly heard the end of the exchange. "That was cold, Tessa," she said, though there was a strange admiration in her tone. Refusing to help your own father? I turned to her. I did not soften my expression. I did not apologize. Mrs. Gable, I said, my voice steady enough to be carved into stone, I do not save the reputation of those who never saved me. The donor paused, then raised her glass. To integrity, she said. To the truth, I replied. I handed the tablet back to Noah. Process the rejection, send the notification, and then get me the auction paddle. We have a goal to beat. The digital world moves faster than the real one. By the time the waiters were clearing the dessert plates, the clip of Grant's speech had already escaped the ballroom. It started as a ripple, a few guests showing their screens to one another at table 4, a whisper at table 9. Then, it became a wave. Noah appeared at my side, his tablet glowing with a graph that looked like a vertical cliff face. You are trending, Noah said, his voice tight with a mixture of excitement and terror. Someone live-streamed the speech, a political blogger picked it up, then a local news anchor retweeted it. The hashtag, The Silent Architect, is trending in Georgia, and Monroe Gala is right behind it. I looked at the screen. There was the video, shaky and filmed from a phone, capturing the exact moment Grant pointed at me. The caption read, Senator Halverson roasts his own girlfriend's family to praise the real MVP. This is the energy we need in 2026. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. Who is the sister? She looks like a boss. Imagine hiding a genius in the basement. Family toxicity is real. I want to donate just to spite the parents. It was a public relations wildfire, and my family was standing right in the center of the burn zone. I looked toward the double doors. Grant had followed my family into the foyer, likely to ensure they actually left the premises before the fraud rejection email hit my father's inbox. I needed to ensure the exit was handled correctly. I signaled to Noah to take over the floor and walked quietly toward the exit. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped into the cool, marble-floored lobby. The scene I walked into was not a shouting match. It was something far more final. Grant was standing near the valet stand. Brielle was standing in front of him, her face streaked with mascara, her hands gesturing wildly. My parents were huddled a few feet away, staring at their phones with expressions of absolute horror. It is just a misunderstanding, Brielle was saying, her voice shrill and desperate. Grant, please, you are overreacting. My dad just made a mistake with the paperwork. And Tessa, you know how Tessa is. She loves to play the victim. She probably set this whole thing up to make us look bad. Grant looked at her. He did not look angry. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a long, confusing dream. Brielle, Grant said. He did not raise his voice. He spoke with the quiet, devastating clarity of a man who is done negotiating. Stop. But this is not about Tessa, Grant said, and it is not about the paperwork. Though that was criminal, this is about you. Brielle froze. Me? I listened to you for months, Grant continued. I listened to you talk about your family. You painted a picture of a burden. You made your sister sound like a failure to make yourself look like a success. And tonight, I realized that you were not protecting me from her mediocrity. You were hiding her excellence because it threatened you. I was not, Brielle protested, though her eyes darted away. I wanted us to be perfect for you. That is the problem, Grant said. You care more about the image of the relationship than the reality of the people in it. He took a half step back, creating a physical distance that felt like miles. I cannot respect a partner who views her own blood as a source of shame. Grant stated, if you can treat your sister like that, the woman who literally wrote the legislation I stand on, then I have to wonder how you would treat me the moment I stopped being useful to you. Grant, Brielle gasped, reaching for his arm. Are you breaking up with me? Here? Now? I am ending this, Grant corrected her, stepping out of her reach. And I am doing it now because I refuse to spend one more hour in a lie. He turned to the valet. My car, please. Brielle stood there, her hand suspended in the air. The rejection was total. It was public. And worst of all for her, it was not because of a scandal she could spin. It was because of her character. She spun around, looking for a target, and her eyes landed on me standing by the ballroom doors. "You did this!" she screamed. The veneer of the socialite was gone. She was just a mean girl who had lost her prom king. "Are you happy now? You ruined everything. You ruined my relationship. You ruined Dad's business. You are a snake, Tessa, a jealous, bitter snake." "I am not jealous, Brielle," I said, stepping into the light of the lobby. "And I am not bitter. I am just busy." "You planned this," she accused, jabbing a finger at me. "You wanted to go viral. Look at my phone. Look at my Instagram. People are commenting snake emojis on my pictures. You destroyed my brand." "Your brand," I repeated. "Is that what you're worried about? Not Dad's fraud charge? Not the fact that you just lost a good man? You are worried about your comment section?" "It is my life," she shrieked. "No," I said. "It is your filter. And tonight, the filter broke." Behind her, my parents were making sounds of distress. It wasn't because of the breakup. It was the phones. "Oh my God," my mother whispered, clutching my father's arm. "Robert, look. It is your sister, and Cousin Jerry, and the neighbors." My father looked at his screen, his face gray. "They are all texting. Everyone. They saw the video." "What are they saying?" I asked, though I already knew. My mother looked up at me, her eyes wide and wet. They are asking why we never told them. Jerry says, "I thought you said Tessa was a secretary," Martha says. "Did you know she runs the biggest charity in the state?" She swallowed hard. "They are asking if we are ashamed of you," my mother whispered. "They are asking what is wrong with us." The social pressure they had used to control me for 30 years had suddenly reversed its flow. They had spent a lifetime trying to look perfect for the neighbors, for the family, for the club. Now, those very people were looking at them and seeing the ugly truth. They weren't the parents of a disappointment. They were the parents who had tried to bury a diamond. "Tell them the truth," I said simply. "Tell them you didn't look close enough to notice." "Tessa, please," my father croaked. "We can fix this. We can put out a statement, a joint family statement, saying we are so proud." "No," I said. "You do not get to claim the victory lap when you didn't run the race." I turned my back on them. My phone was vibrating in my clutch. Calls from unknown numbers, likely reporters who had dug up my personal line. I ignored them all. I walked back toward the ballroom. Just as I reached the doors, a young woman with a press badge and a frantic energy intercepted me. She was from the Savannah Chronicle. "Ms. Monroe," she called out, holding up a voice recorder. "Just one comment. The video is everywhere. People are calling this a revenge success story. Is that what this is? Did you plan this event to get back at your family?" I stopped. I looked at the reporter. I looked at the camera lens over her shoulder. I thought about the 17-year-old girl who was told she would never make money helping people. I thought about the woman who ate ramen so she could pay a lawyer to save a stranger's house. "I do not do this for revenge," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Revenge is a waste of energy. I do this because there are families who need help." I paused, letting the camera focus. "I told my story tonight not to hurt anyone," I said. "I told it to remind every person watching that just because you are silent, it does not mean you are small. And just because you are ignored, it does not mean you are invisible." The reporter nodded, typing furiously. "Thank you, Ms. Monroe." I walked back into the ballroom. The atmosphere inside had shifted. It was electric. The guests weren't just attending a gala anymore. They were part of a moment. The auctioneer was on stage, shouting numbers that were climbing higher than our wildest projections. "Sold for $15,000. I checked the master tablet. We had just crossed $5 million. We were 150% over our goal. Noah rushed up to me, grinning like a madman. "Tessa, the website crashed for 2 minutes because of the traffic, but we are back up, Online donations are pouring in from all over the country. People are donating $5, $10, with notes saying, "For the silent architect, we are going to break every record we have." "Keep the servers up," I commanded, though I felt a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "And getting the thank you letters ready. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow." I looked back at the lobby doors one last time. The valet stand was empty. Grant's car was gone. Brielle was walking toward the parking lot alone, her gold dress looking dull in the streetlights. My father was standing by a pillar, staring at nothing, looking like a man whose foundation had just crumbled. My mother was weeping into a tissue, finally realizing that she had spent 30 years loving a version of her daughter that didn't exist, and completely missing the woman who did. They were gone. The noise of their drama was fading. But as I looked at the ticker climbing to 5,100,000, I knew the story wasn't quite over. My father was a proud man, and proud men do not handle humiliation well. He had lost the grant. He had lost his social standing. He had lost control. The viral moment was a wave, and waves eventually crash. When the water receded, I would still have to deal with the wreckage. I took a deep breath of the expensive, flower-scented air. "Next item," I whispered to myself. "Let's finish this." The morning sun hit the floorboards of my apartment with a brightness that felt aggressive. My phone had been vibrating on the kitchen counter since 7 in the morning. I had ignored the reporters. I had ignored the distant cousins requesting to connect on LinkedIn. But when the screen flashed Dad, I finally picked it up. "Tessa." His voice sounded thin, stripped of the bravado he usually wore like a suit of armor. "I saw the news. I saw the donation total." "Good morning, Dad," I said, pouring hot water over my coffee grounds. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked. It was the question I knew was coming. It was the question that absolved him of guilt and placed the burden of his ignorance back on my shoulders. "If we had known you were running something that big, if we had known you were that successful, we would have treated you differently." I set the kettle down. The steam rose in the quiet kitchen. "That is exactly the point," I said. "You would have treated the CEO differently, but you would have still treated Tessa the same." "That is not fair," he argued weakly. "We are family. You have an obligation to share your life with us." "I did share it," I replied, my voice calm. "I told you every time I got a grant. I told you when we opened the new office. I told you when I won the state commendation. You changed the subject. You asked if I was dating anyone. You asked why I was driving an old car. I have been speaking for 10 years. Dad, you just were not listening." There was a long silence on the line. "I do not have an obligation to advertise myself to be loved," I continued. "I am your daughter, not a billboard." "We want to fix this," he said. "Your mother has been crying all morning. We want to know you. Tessa, really know you." I leaned against the counter. I wanted to believe him, but I had spent a lifetime accepting crumbs and calling it a meal. I was done starving. "Okay," I said. "Then let us take a test." "A test?" "Tell me 3 things you know about me." I challenged him. 3 things that are not about my job title. 3 things that are not about who I am dating. 3 things you know because you asked, not because you overheard them. The silence that followed was heavy. It stretched for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. I could hear him breathing, his mind scrambling to find a detail, a favorite color, a hobby, a fear. He found nothing. He realized, in that terrified silence, that he knew the stranger on the news better than he knew the woman he had raised. He started, then stopped. "Check your email," I said. "I just sent you a link. It is the annual impact report for Harbor Bridge. It is 200 pages long. It contains everything I have built, everything I value, and everything I fight for. Read it, read every word, and when you are done, if you still want to know who I am, call me. We will get coffee." I hung up. I did not feel cruel. I felt clean. 2 hours later, I was back in my office. The adrenaline of the gala had faded, replaced by the grim reality of administrative cleanup. Noah walked in, holding a physical file. He did not look happy. "The board met at 9 o'clock, Noah said. "Regarding the Apex Consulting application." I nodded. "And?" "They rejected it, obviously," Noah said, placing the file on my desk. "Unanimous vote. Failure to meet transparency criteria. Potential fraudulent misrepresentation of data." He hesitated. "Jonathan Sterling asked me to ask you," Noah said quietly. "Do you want us to seal the reason? We can just list it as insufficient funds available. It would spare your father the official mark of fraud on the internal blacklist. It would keep his record clean." I looked at the file. I looked at the signature. Robert Monroe. If I sealed it, I would be protecting him one last time. I would be doing exactly what Brielle had done, hiding the ugly truth to keep the picture pretty. But Harbor Bridge was built on the idea that truth is the only thing that heals. "No," I said. "Mark it as rejected for misrepresentation. Put it in the permanent log." "Tessa," Noah warned gently, "that burns a bridge. He will know." "I am not burning the bridge," I said, opening my laptop. "I am just refusing to pay the toll for him anymore. Process it." My father received the rejection notification that afternoon. He did not call. He did not text. I imagined him sitting in his study, reading the words, misrepresentation of facts, realizing that his daughter had chosen principle over protection. It must have stung. It must have felt like a betrayal. But it was the wake-up call that 30 years of politeness had failed to deliver. The weeks passed. The viral fame cooled down, as it always does. The internet moved on to the next scandal, but the donations remained. We hired 5 new caseworkers. We expanded the legal defense fund. The work continued. I did not hear from my family for a month. Then, on a rainy Tuesday in November, the receptionist called my line. "Ms. Monroe," she said, "there is a volunteer here for the orientation session. He says he knows you." I walked out to the lobby. My father was standing there. He was not wearing his expensive suit. He was wearing khakis and a raincoat. He looked older, humbled, holding a dripping umbrella. He saw me and straightened up. He did not try to hug me. He did not smile his salesman's smile. "I read the report," he said. "All 200 pages." I stood still. And I realized," he said, his voice rough, "that on page 42, you talk about the efficiency of data entry and processing claims. You said it is the unglamorous backbone of the operation." He took a breath. "I am not asking for a job," he said quickly. "And I am not asking for a loan. I am retired. I have time. I am good with spreadsheets. I thought maybe I could start there, at the bottom." I looked at him. I saw a man who had finally stopped trying to be the patriarch and was willing to just be a person. He wasn't asking for a seat at the head table anymore. He was asking for a seat at the workbench. "Orientation starts in 10 minutes, I said. "Noah runs it. Don't be late." My father nodded. "I won't." He walked toward the conference room. It wasn't a movie-perfect reconciliation. It was tentative. It was fragile. But it was real. Brielle took a different path. She did not come to the office. She went to therapy. She sent me a letter 3 months later, written on plain paper. She admitted that she hadn't hated me. She had been terrified of me. She wrote, "You were the mirror I couldn't look into. You were everything I wasn't. Disciplined, real, substantial. I tried to make you small because you made me feel empty. We are not best friends. We probably never will be. But we text on Sundays. She asks about my work. I ask about her pottery class. It is a start." As for Grant, he never came back. He was a man of high standards, and once he saw the cracks in the foundation, he could not unsee them. But on the 1-year anniversary of the gala, a package arrived at my office. It was a copy of the passed healthcare bill, signed by the governor. Attached was a handwritten note on Senate stationery. "Tessa, politics is usually a game of smoke and mirrors. Thank you for reminding me that it is worth fighting for the solid ground. You are the most formidable woman I have ever met." I put the note in my desk drawer. I didn't need him. I didn't need his validation. but I respected the acknowledgement. Exactly 1 year after the night that changed everything, I stood on the stage of the grand ballroom again. The room was full. The flowers were white lilies this time. The banner read, Harbor Bridge 2026. I looked out at the sea of faces. My father was there, sitting at table 12, wearing a volunteer badge. He waved at me. It was a small wave. I nodded back. I adjusted the microphone. I did not talk about my family drama. I did not mention the viral video. I spoke about the 6,000 families we had kept in their homes. I spoke about the future. We spend so much of our lives waiting for permission to be great, I said to the crowd. We wait for someone to hand us a microphone. We wait for someone to invite us to the table. I looked at the empty seat at table 1 where Grant had sat, and the seat where Brielle had run from. But the work does not wait, I continued. Recognition can be late. It often is, but the truth is always on time. The applause washed over me, warm and genuine. I looked at the lights, blinding and bright, and I felt a profound sense of peace. My father once told me to disappear so the family would look better. He wanted me to be a ghost, but in the end, they had to sit at my table to realize I was never small. I was just overlooked, and being overlooked is a superpower, because it gives you the time to build a mountain while everyone else is busy looking at themselves in the mirror. I smiled, stepped back, and let the work speak for itself. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed this journey of justice and self-worth. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below telling me where you are listening from, whether it is your morning commute in London, a late night in New York, or a sunny afternoon in Sydney. Let's connect. And if you enjoyed Tessa's story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can get these stories out to more people who need to hear them. See you in the next one.